Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Ignite Business Talks podcast channel. So, my name is Ignatius L. Jackson, CPA, and we're here today talking to you about an interesting topic. What happens if you operate in multiple states? And are you operating in multiple states and not even realizing you're operating in multiple states? We're going to go through that a little bit for you here today and give you some good insights and thoughts to consider. And maybe you might need to talk to your CPA or tax accountant about whether or not you need to be filing income taxes or sales taxes in multiple states. So go ahead and stay tuned. We're going to be right back here in a second. All right, everybody, and we're back. So thanks for tuning in today to the Ignite Business Talks podcast. So looking forward to chatting about some stuff with you guys. So today we are talking about multi-state taxation, okay? Now, most people would probably think that they need to file in multiple states when they have different locations in different states, a bunch of employees in other states, etc. But it's actually a little more complicated and difficult than that, okay? So we're going to go through a few of the rules in relation to multi-state taxation here. Now, this is primarily going to be focused on income taxes, but also keep in mind that sales tax is a consideration as well when you're shipping goods to multiple states or have people going into multiple states to sell products and stuff like that. So you could become subject to sales tax as well. But we're going to focus primarily on income taxes here first, and then we'll touch on sales tax just a little bit towards the end. But really, from a sales tax standpoint, you want to go with a company that's going to really help you determine proper sales tax treatments because it's very, very specialized field. All right, there's so many jurisdictions out there. I don't even know how many total jurisdictions there are, but there's just so many out there that most people are not going to be able to specialize and really know everything about sales tax and know everything about income tax. It's very hard to kind of do really well on both sides of those equations. So you might find someone who will do some stuff for their local, like where they're based. Like if you're only in Arizona, they can maybe help you out. But when you start having multiple jurisdictions or like you're an online retailer or something like that, you might need to explore an expert in sales tax to make sure you're following all the rules. Okay. So, but let's talk about income taxes first. Okay. So when you go to income taxes, each state's a little bit different on whether you have Nexus. Nexus is that term that you sometimes will hear accountants talk about or the states talk about, right? And Nexus basically means you have some sort of presence in that state that would subject you to income taxes, okay? It's typically some sort of physical presence, but it could also be an economical presence of some sort that would subject you to income taxes in that state. So there's usually three factors that we're going to look at, okay? You have sales in that state, you have payroll in that state, or you have assets in that state, okay? So let's talk about the sales part first. So that one's fairly easy typically to figure out, okay? Do you have sales in the state or not? So you kind of look at, do you have sales? Like, do you have people that go there that they're making sales? Do you have an office in that state where sales are being made from? Stuff like that is what you want to look at to determine if you have sales in that state. Okay. Do you have boots on the ground basically that are going out there and making sales? Okay. So from that standpoint, you could have Nexus if you have sales from a particular state. Additionally, you have payroll. Okay. Now payroll is going to be, you have employees in that state. All right. So this gets a little tricky, especially with what we had during COVID. We had all these employees traveling around to different states and stuff like that. So the important thing I want you to really know is, like, if you have employees that are in different states, then you probably need to be talking to your accountant about whether or not you need to file income taxes in each of those states. All right. So there's certain thresholds and stuff like that that would get you to the point where you need to file in the state. But you at least need to be exploring the conversation and understand, like, how many employees do you have in a state, etc. So having employees in a bunch of different states definitely can backfire on you. And it's something that people don't necessarily think about in this gig worker economy or remote worker economy or whatever you want to call it, right? So if you have employees that are in like 10 different states, there's a possibility you could have to file taxes in 10 different states. It's just that crazy. Okay. So just kind of keep that stuff in mind that, sometimes you have to kind of worry about that nexus question. And so the third item is assets. Okay. What do I mean by assets? This could be inventory. It can be fixed assets like a building or a piece of equipment or something like that. It can be basically assets that are located within that state. So if you have various assets in that state, inventory, fixed assets, etc., then you could very well be subject to income taxes in that particular state. Okay. And so each state's going to be different on how they do those three tests. Some states only look at one test, the sales factor. Okay. Some states only look at two tests, and some states look at all three tests as a determination of the apportionment. So apportionment is another key word when it comes to multi-state taxation. Is your apportion? When you say apportionment, that basically means you're allocating the income amongst the various states. Okay, so you have your federal income taxes for income that you earned all over the world, including the U.S., right? Including all states you operate in. And then you have each state that you have income that you've derived from that state. And so the way that they allocate that or apportion it is based off of those three factors. How much sales do you have in each state? How much payroll do you have in each state? And how much assets do you have in each state? Is typically how they're going to go through and delineate or allocate or apportion the income to the various states. Okay. So those are some of the key factors you want to kind of think about and consider. Do you have any of those things in multiple states? If you do, then the key is, we're not going to go through all the detailed rigmarole, right? But the key is you need to make sure you're talking to your accountant about those items to make sure you're actually following the tax law and filing in all the states that you need to. Okay. Now let's touch on sales tax just briefly. So from a sales tax standpoint, okay, what we're going to focus on here is both physical nexus and economic nexus. Okay, so from a physical nexus standpoint, that's fairly easy to determine. Do you have inventory in the state? Do you ship goods into the state? Are you providing services into the state, etc.? Right. So there's various components of physical nexus that would probably drive you into a sales tax situation for a particular state. Okay, for example, you have rental properties located in each state. Well, if that state has taxes on rental properties, sales tax, then you're going to be filing in that state. Okay. Same thing for the income tax side also, right? Obviously, if you have rental properties in a particular state, then you're going to be filing income taxes for that state, assuming you have a profit. Most rental properties are operating at losses for a period of time, but if you have a profit in your real estate activity, then you probably have to file some taxes in that state. Okay. So that's the physical nexus for sales tax. But the key thing that kind of really changed quite substantially a few years ago with the Wayfair decision is the economic nexus. Okay. So basically what that means is if you have transactions like over $100,000 typically is the threshold, or 200 transactions in a particular state, then economically, even if you don't have any physical nexus in that state, if you have economic nexus, meaning you're deriving sales from people in that state, etc., enough that gets you over that threshold, then in theory, they could still come after you for sales tax in that particular state or jurisdiction that your customers are kind of located in and where you're doing business in a sense, even though you don't have any physical nexus in that particular state. So it's become a lot more difficult to understand whether you have nexus or not. And so that's why I say when it comes to sales tax, it's definitely important to work with someone that specializes in it and has all the rules for each of the various jurisdictions, because it's not just states, it's also counties and cities and towns and other municipalities. I mean, there's all kinds of different levels of sales tax that you have to be worried about, as well as use tax is another form of sales tax as well. And so it's just way too complicated for everyone to specialize in it. That's why people specialize pretty much solely in state and local income taxes. Okay. So go find yourself a SALT expert. That's the abbreviation of state and local income taxes. And they should be able to help you determine if you need to actually worry about filing taxes in that particular state. Okay. So, um, so yeah, that's basically the topic for today. Multi-state taxation, pretty brief topic. The main thing I want to kind of just stress to people is, believe it or not, you might have a filing obligation in multiple states if you have employees that are working in multiple states. That is one downside to the remote worker economy that we're kind of going into here, where people are working more hybrid roles or fully remote from home and moving all over the place. So you have to really know which state your employees are in. It also matters from a payroll tax standpoint. Okay, we didn't really talk about payroll tax in this video, but if you have employees in multiple states, that means you also have to file payroll taxes in multiple states and understand all the payroll rules for each particular state that your employees are in. So having all that go on may make you rethink a little bit about having employees in all these different states, or maybe you try to get employees in like 2 or 3 states. That way you only have to focus on those states instead of worrying about 20 different states or something crazy like that, right? So just some other thoughts to consider if you have multiple employees in multiple states, that you got to determine all your filing obligations from income taxes, sales taxes, and payroll taxes. Okay. So thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ignite Business Talks podcast. Hopefully this was insightful or good information for you. By all means, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, share the video. Also, leave me a comment if you have any questions. I'll do my best to answer them. And if you have any need for services or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to take a look and see if you'd be a good fit for each other. Okay. Hope everybody has a good one, and we'll talk to you some more later. Peace.